Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this lovely Friday morning. Today, we are going to get started with our webinar called The ABCs of Working with Men and Boys. So I am just here to very briefly remind everyone about some of the features that we'll be using today here in Zoom. Primarily, we will be using the chat for any questions, comments, and ideas. So as a reminder, if you would like everyone to see what you put in the chat, make sure that you change that little setting from hosts and panelists, which will just go to the hosts and panelists, right, to everyone so that everyone can see what you have to say, particularly if you're asking a relevant question or if you are answering one of our speakers' questions today. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Hannah Stewart. She's our Prevention and Specialized Advocacy Coordinator here at SCCADVASA, and she's going to introduce today's speaker.
Thank you and good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our May webinar and our SCKnowMore webinar series. Today we are joined by Patrick Patterson for the ABCs of Working with Men and Boys. Patrick is the president of Global Partners for Fathers and Families Consulting, a national consulting firm that equips schools, hospitals, Head Start, Healthy Start, public and private sector agencies with the tools to authentically serve fathers, men, boys, and their families. Patrick has launched and managed community, statewide, and national fatherhood programs during his 20-year career, including serving as contact manager for the National Responsible Fatherhood Clearinghouse during the George W. Bush administration, Obama, Trump, and currently the Biden administration. As an expert of working with fathers, men, and boys, Patrick has been a featured fatherhood keynote workshop leader or trainer in 46 states, the Virgin Islands, and 7 different countries. He is married to his high school sweetheart, Sherry Ann, and they have 2 beautiful daughters, Peyton and Lauren, with whom Patrick has co-authored 2 children's books entitled I Love When Daddy Reads to Me and Unplugged, A Day of Family Fun Without Devices. Patrick earned a Bachelor of Social Work degree from Benedict College here in Columbia, which is an HBCU, and a dual master's degrees in social work and public health from the University of South Carolina. So Patrick, thank you so much for joining us today, and I will turn it over to you.
Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Happy Friday, everybody. Hope you guys are doing well. And if you're gonna allow me to share my screen, thank you. Thank you, Hannah and Ashley and Tricia, for allowing us to have an opportunity to share today. I bring you greetings from my family first. I'm really excited about the work that we do. You'll hear a little bit about, professionally speaking, how this relates to me, and you also hear about this in terms of personally. Secondly, I will say working with fathers has been my life's passion. I have 20 plus years of experience. I have no desire to do anything else. I wake up early to do this work, and I really, really, really enjoy it. So I take great pride in having an opportunity to share. I have specifically 3 goals for today, but I'll start with just kind of a brief introduction of how we plan to engage today. Can you see this, Hannah? Can you see this, my slides?
Yes, we can see.
Awesome, awesome. Background, you heard Hannah read that. Thank you again, Hannah, for the invitation. I am a Columbia native, born and raised in Columbia. I'm a C.A. Johnson High School Hornet. I grew up in a community called Saxon Homes, which is no longer there, but it was the projects. A lot of people recognize that term, but it was a place that I loved and endeared, and it was a place that shaped the man that I am today. I grew up in a family that was not the wealthiest, but the house was full of love. And that definition, matters regarding who you speak to. But I also saw several things that have brought me to the work that I'm doing today. When I think about my 3 goals for today, One is to teach and share the ABCs of work with men and boys. I am not a domestic violence practitioner. I have been working with domestic violence organizations for my 20 plus years. I believe in the work of DV organizations. I also believe in the work of empowering young men and boys. And so I'll talk about in a second, my experience doing the work in both sectors. I want to teach and share effective engagement approaches, and then I want to learn together. I expect to share some things, but I also want to learn some things from you guys as well. Myth versus reality. When I first started doing this work 20 plus years ago, I'll never forget, I was in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and I was newly hired to do fatherhood engagement for the country. And I was so excited about the chance to do what I believe was my passion. And the first assignment that I received was to go and present at this National Domestic Violence Conference. And I remember it like yesterday. I had on a blue suit, I had on a standard government red tie, and I was so excited. I'm 47, so I was probably 26 or 27 at the time. I got up, I remember getting up, working out early, thinking, wow, like the lobby was full of people. And I was like, this is going to be so awesome because they cannot wait to hear how we can collaborate. And I went down my traditional presentation. At the time I was working with the government. And I finished my presentation. I said, any questions? And when I tell you, I learned a lot more about domestic violence as a field that day. I jokingly told Tricia and Hannah that I lost a leg because they chewed me to the pieces because of my perspective and the work that I've done. I didn't consider some of the important things that I should have been aware of, but I didn't know. But this graphic tells a story that I understand a lot more deeply now. The myth is that domestic violence organizations are opposing to organizations that want to build and work with men. The reality is, if you can visualize this visual, our hands, if you put two fists together, people assume that the two fists are coming together. But if you open up your fingers and they interlock, that's the reality of what we're trying to do. We both want families to be healthy. We both want families to be safe. We both want parents to actually enjoy parenting their children in a healthy, protective manner. Neither of us ascribes to violence, neither of us. And so I always like to set the foundation because it's important to know that we're walking down the same path. I believe there are a myriad of paths to the same goal. And the work that domestic violence organizations do, along with the work that we're doing, work with fathers, men, and boys, same goal, same goal. Really, really, really important to me. Let me step back. You've heard from Hannah kind of what I do, but I'll tell you why I do it. And if you're looking at the screen on the right, in the blue is a picture of myself. That is probably 6 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, I'm not sure. And on the left is a picture of my father. My father was born in Colombia. My father did not finish 8th grade. This is a picture in 1975, I believe. And he's told me this, describe this picture, but he was just released from incarceration. And I still say my dad was a cool cat. If you look at the hat, you could see he was a cool cat. But my father, for the longest while, spent many years in and out of incarceration. For the longest while, my father he ran the streets. For the longest while, my father did things that were illegal in nature. For the longest while, he didn't know who he was. And so in my family, my mom, my dad, when I was born in 1974, they were married. I have 3 siblings. I have a sister 6 years older, a brother 4 years older, and a brother 4 years younger. And my 2 oldest siblings, the journey that I'm describing to you that my father was on, from robbing people in and out of incarceration, substance abuse centers, those 2 experienced that ride with my mom. For whatever reason, in 1974, when I was born, for whatever reason, I'm not the oldest, I'm not the first boy, I'm not the only. For whatever reason, the third of 4 children was born, myself, and my father stopped doing all of that stuff. For the longest time in my childhood, my father worked 3 jobs. And in between those jobs, he came home and took cat naps. And when I think about cat naps, I always ask people, how long is a cat nap? Somebody put in the chat box, how long is a cat nap? Hannah, read those answers to me. How long is a cat nap? Somebody tell me how long is a cat nap?
Okay, we're getting about 20 minutes, 15, an hour, half an hour, a lot of half hours.
An hour, that's sleep. That's not a nap.
Someone said 13 minutes.
13 minutes, yeah. So I always think about my experience with my dad, because when I was a kid, true story, my father would come home for those cat naps. We had a recliner in the living room in our apartment in Saxon Homes. We lived in 20-5, I'll never forget. We could hear my dad's car coming into the neighborhood. We could hear him put it in park. That's how in tune we were. That's how excited we were. My brothers, I have 2 brothers. My brothers and I used to race when he sat in his recliner. We used to race to take his boots off. That's how excited we were. My father came home for that cat nap. When he came home, typically one of us was sitting in his chair. And my mother would say to us, and I know somebody's going to put it in the chat box, what would my mother say to us when my dad came home and we were sitting in that chair? Somebody tell me, what would they say? Put it in the chat box. Leave your
father alone.
Leave your father alone. Get up. Yes. There you go. Margaret said it. Get out of your daddy's chair. TV would be on cartoons, the Flintstones, and my mother would say, turn that TV down. My sister, my mom, and I'm not ashamed of this, but my sister, my mom would have been in the kitchen. My brothers and I would have been playing around with G.I. Joes or He-Man and just having a good old time. And then my dad came home, somehow, some way, everything was repositioned. But he'd come in, my mother said, get out of his chair. He'd sit in the chair. And for that few minutes, my mom and my sister would bring him his food, his tall glass of sweet tea. He would digest that. He would lay back in that chair, go to sleep, and then he'd go to his next job. From birth to 15, I saw my dad do that every day, except for the weekends here and there. At the age of 15, my dad, for all of my childhood, was a sober man. I told you about before I was born, for all of my childhood was a sober man. Did not drink, did not smoke outside of cigarettes, didn't do drugs, but that was in his past. And here's when my life changed. And here's how I became part of this work. At the age of 15, I'm in the 10th grade. My father applied for a job. If you know Columbia well, there was a Coca-Cola factory on North Main. Now you can go down there and there's Cromer's, there's Earlwood Park, there's a couple other things on there, but there was a Coca-Cola factory that was on that main strip. My father applied for a job there. He worked there for 1 year. And in 1 year's time, became a manager. 8th grade education, some would say a checkered past, but the man knew how to work. I told you he had 3 jobs. So in that year's time, we moved from Saxon Homes to an area in Columbia called Barnaville Estates. And just listen to that, estates. I mean, it sounds different than apartment. We were renting the house, but it was our house. No more laundromat. No more clotheslines where you're sharing it with neighbors. No more having neighbors on both sides of you. So if they were playing music loud on a Sunday night or Saturday night, you had to just digest it. But we finally had our own driveway. Carport. I didn't know what a carport was. So fast forward, my dad gets recognized as a manager. They offer him to come to this banquet, which my dad had never been to a banquet like this before. He didn't have a suit, y'all. My mother and my father went downtown to the 5 and Dime store, got him a jacket, got him a shirt, got him a tie. My dad gets dressed up. I still remember this like yesterday. My mother, as we're in the room, my younger brother and I are in the room, my dad is getting ready to go to this banquet. We can't go, it's a school night. My mom says to my father, Pat, I'm proud of you. And this huge lump formed in my dad's throat. I saw, as a 15-year-old, for the first time, I thought I was going to see my dad cry. And for whatever reason, the lump that formed, the tears that were welling up, they went away. He pushed the lump down. Why did he push the lump down? Somebody put in the chat, why did he push the lump down that was forming in his throat? Somebody tell me, help me out. Michelle says pride. Carolyn says men don't cry. Tracy says sign of weakness. Male gender stereotypes from Miss Colvin. Rebecca, she says humble, fear of showing emotions. Men don't show emotion. Tears may be seen as feminine from Cynthia. You guys are on it. You guys are on it. I'll close by saying this. My dad left to go to the banquet. My brother and I went to bed happy. Because it was like, we saw that moment, but it evaporated really quickly. My dad left, he went to the banquet. My dad went back to Saxon Homes, our old neighborhood, where he still had friends who he served time with in prison. He stops by, and this is the end of the story. He stops by, and he stops by to say to them, not look at me as he's holding his plaque. He's told me the story. His best friend, Thad, has told me the story as well. Not look at me, but look at this as he's holding this plaque. Like, yo, we've been talking about getting out of the rut, and I'm doing it. I'm doing it. So Thad and the boys say to my father, who hasn't had a drink in 15 years, hey, Pat, my dad's name is Pat, my name is Patrick. Hey, Pat, ain't no way we're gonna let you leave here without us celebrating. So my father says to them, I'm good. And just first note, if you're writing down anything, I want you to write this down. When men say I'm good, oftentimes they're not. Not every time. I don't want to generalize. Oftentimes they're not. So Thad says, come on, man. Don't be a blah, blah, blah. Y'all know what a blah, blah, blah is. So my father says, I'm good, man. I got to get home. I got to get to work, you know. And so the oldest trick in the book, and some of you guys have seen this trick used and used effectively. The oldest trick in the book, Thad, my dad's friend, and I'm doing air quotes, says, oh, you think you're better than us. Y'all ever seen that trick tried on you before or somebody you know? That trick is still powerful these days. Oh, you think you're better than us. So my father says, you know what, guys? I'm still Pat. I will have one beer with y'all. And after this one beer, I'm out of here. And if you know anything about substance abuse or substance use, if you have abstained for some period, the triggers are real. So he had a beer, knocked it down quickly. And then somebody tell me what happens after he had that one beer. Just put in the chat box. What happens after he had that one beer? Laura said he had another. Yeah, he finished the 6-pack, guys. Within minutes, finished the 6-pack. My father then, because of my neighborhood, somebody pulls out top paper. And if you don't know what top paper is, Google it. But people use it back in the day to smoke reefer. They call it all kinds of things now. I was in a prison in Ohio not long ago, and they were calling it, peep this, y'all, they were calling it Zaza. And I'm thinking Zaza Gabor, and they're like, nah, that's the new code. They call it gas. They call it broccoli. They call it Mary Jane, brown sugar. I say this, I have daughters. My wife and I have 2 daughters. I'm trying my best to make sure that I'm as versed in my work that I do every day, but also I have children. And oftentimes, if we're not aware, you could be being talked over right in front of you. But they start smoking some weed. They finish doing that. They pull out a brown bag that has liquor in it, hard liquor. This is all in the same setting. They knock down a couple of those brown bags. And because of my neighborhood, a party ain't a party unless you pull out what Thad pulled out at the very end of this journey. He pulls out a needle. And he says to my father, hey, Pat, for old time's sake, let's just hit it one time. Now, my dad is already inebriated. My dad's told me the story. He shoots in his vein heroin. After his first shot, as he calls it, it didn't do what it normally does. So Thad, being the good friend, I'm using air quotes again, that he is, Thad offers him another shot at it. My dad takes a second shot, injection of heroin, and he collapses on Reed Street. If you know Columbia, Reed Street is not what it was when I was a kid. He falls out. For 3 days, my father did not come home. I'm a 10th grader. I went to football practice the next day, came home. My mom does her best in this situation to like act normal, but all I've ever known is both of them in the house. My brother, my younger brother, all we have known, both of them in the house. So 3 days later, my father comes in. My dad had a Buick 225. They used to call it a deuce and a quarter. He pulls into the driveway, our carport. He has on the same clothes he had on that day. He walks in the house really fast. He walks past me and my brother. My brother trying to figure out what. My dad looks disheveled. He goes in the room. He puts on his uniform for Coca-Cola. He leaves out, and I promise you guys, in 30 minutes, my father returned home. What happened? Why did he come home so quickly? Yeah, he got fired. He got fired. The next 20 years of my life, and I'll end here, I spent as a high school student walking to football practice, and the guy in the cut, and y'all know what the cut is, or the guy in the alley that you walk past, the homeless guy at the gas station asking to wash your car, that was my father. When I went to Benedict College, which is only a mile from where I grew up, the dorm director would call my room and say, Patrick, you have a visitor and he's drunk. That was my father. When I went to USC and started graduate school, and my wife and I got our first apartment, and we'd hear a knock on the door at 3 a.m. That was my father. My internship, my first job out of college, I worked at the Sisters of Charity Foundation, which is one of the largest foundations in the state of South Carolina. Very prestigious organization. The administrative assistant would call me at my desk. Patrick, you have a visitor. He's sitting on your car. He's calling your name. It was my father. The next 20 years, y'all, I spent in the same community, and I witnessed my father, the man that was my hero, the man that led me, taught me how to fight, how to play sports, how to shake a man's hand, how to look a man in the eye. And I say man, but I mean a person in the eye. The man that really helped me to understand how to be. I watched him deteriorate right in front of me. My younger brother did as well. He was 4 years younger than me, y'all. I was 15, a pivotal point in our lives, but we watched that. As I close at the end of this, I'll share with you guys just part of why the work that I do is so important, because my father and I reconciled. And as I get into the presentation, I'll share with you guys some of the things that are so important that we have to understand about fathers, men, and boys. Super, super important. My father died in 2015. And before I close, Hannah, if I forget, just have me just kind of finish that story, because I want to get into some of the content. But my father, and you'll hear why, is the reason why I'm doing this work. Using the chat box, I want you to answer this question, and you think about males in any age. I wish that males knew. Somebody fill in a box in your chat box. I wish that males knew.
It's okay to show emotion. I wish that that they can show emotion, that they're human, that's okay to cry. Reconciliation. that's okay to be vulnerable and how to be vulnerable, how important they are to their family, that you're important,
Beautiful, beautiful.
to love yourself.
This is great. You guys are on it. Let me ask my second question, and I won't put it on the screen, but I want you to answer the second question. Why don't they know these things? Somebody answer that for me. Just put in the chat. This is a non-judgment. We are one group in here today, so please don't feel like we're grading. Why don't they know this? Why don't they know these? Y'all have put some amazing things in here. Why don't they know this? I see social conditioning.
No one
society.
taught them.
Yeah, go for it, Hannah.
Their fathers, no one told them. Lack of positive role models, the way that they were raised, social conditioning.
Yeah. Wrong thinking, their upbringing. I can think of several things, but I think you guys have covered it. But I want to dive into the first block of our time together. I want to dive into who we're talking about, so we get that appreciation, and the balance of our time will be spent on engagement strategies. Fathers are not around anymore. Society's image, they don't have a good male role model. Their upbringing, wrong thinking. All of these are right answers, guys. All these are right answers. But I will tell you this, most of the men and boys that you know, they want help. They want help. And we're going to talk about how we do that. Who is this? Somebody, who's this on the screen? Who is that? Name a movie. Name a movie that he was in. Name a movie. This is my guy. This is my guy. What movies? Name a movie. Mrs. Doubtfire, Aladdin, The Fisher King. Oh, I forgot about that. Mork and Mindy. Who went back to Mork and Mindy on me? Jumanji. Love it. Love it. Good Morning, Vietnam. Hook. Yes. Yes. Anybody remember Popeye? Dead Poets Society. Good Will Hunting. How did he die? How did he die? Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, for a lot of our men that we're working with, there are two realities that they face, men and boys. One of the realities is what people want them to be. And it goes back to how you guys answered the question about why men don't know or boys don't know they're great or powerful or have strength. And the second reality is what they are hiding. Most of us, and I'll include myself in this, and I've had to go to rounds and rounds of therapy and counseling to overcome some of the things that I just explained to you early on. Most of us are fighting a battle that nobody knows. Now, that's the case for a lot of people, but today we're talking about men and boys. Permission has to be granted for safe sharing for men and boys. A lot of us, I'm gonna say Cleardis McDonald Amaker says, suffering in silence. You summed it up. A lot of males are suffering in silence. One of my favorite analogies is if you think of a Coke bottle that has been shaken for a period of time, and finally you open it, you know what's going to happen with the Coke, right? It's going to splatter everywhere. And for a lot of our guys, you can write this down, most of them have been socialized to internalize. And here's what I mean. Imagine this. You have two 4-year-old kids, a boy and a girl, two 4-year-olds. And we're doing the race that I did in my neighborhood where somebody stands at the other end of 20 yards and they hold out two hands. And when they say on your mark, get set, go, these two children, a boy 4 years old and a girl 4 years old, they both run. I say, go, and they both run. My hands are out, and as they're coming towards me, Both of them, right before they touch my hand, both of them fall. Normal situations. The girl, and I have daughters, so I'm guilty of this. I'm going to magically develop or produce a lollipop for my daughter. I'm going to spank the ground. Don't you trip my baby up. No, I'm gonna do that whole scene. Y'all know that scene. I'm going to sit her on my knee and I'm going to say, it's okay. Baby, it's okay. I beat the ground. You don't have to worry about the ground doing that again. I'm gonna do whatever it takes to make sure that my daughter, or in this case, this 4-year-old girl, feels good. She feels safe. She feels protected. She feels like I got her. Same race, stay with me. 4-year-old boy, he also failed. What are some of the things that you have not said, but you have seen people say to boys in that same situation? I'll start. Get up. Shake it off, I see. Get up and brush it off. You're fine. Be a man. Get up, you'll be okay. Man up, suck it up. Stop crying. Boys don't cry. Keep going. Put some dirt on it. That's one of my favorite ones. There you go. There you go, Ashley. That's it. Yeah, suck it up, rub some dirt in it. Yeah, I've heard that one. I've heard that one myself. You'll be okay, Elizabeth Brown says. So why do I make this analogy? And you guys alluded to it earlier, but societally, we have begun the suffocating of emotions for a lot of males. I'm not making any excuses today, y'all. But a lot of us do not feel safe because of the example that I just shared. And there's several examples. I've done counseling with couples, and I've seen a young woman come in and say, my boyfriend, my fiance doesn't talk to me. He doesn't do this. He doesn't let me know how he feels. And I have to release her. It ain't your fault. He's 27. He's got at least 20 years of messaging that has said to him, suck it up, put some dirt on it. You're gonna be fine. When I played high school sports, if I twist my ankle, which I did in high school, my ankle was the size of a mug. And my coach said, you're gonna be fine. Now, that's sports. But I will tell you, my daughters cheered. That wasn't how we did that with our girls. So I want to create the analogy. This is not every situation, so I know there are outliers. But males are socialized to internalize. We have to have that foundation, because what it leads me to is my next point around creating safety. Creating safety. Remember this. Males on the outside often will say, I'm fine, or I'm good. But on the inside, and this is from K to 70 years old, there's a lot they're trying to process. And we are observant. And we know when it's safe to say, I'm hurt, or I'm feeling sad, or I don't feel like myself. My wife and I have this running conversation about when we were working very, very hard for the government. She worked for a big hospital. If she took off and said, I don't feel well, I'm not coming in, nobody did too much. When I called and said, I'm not feeling well, they were like, well, what's going on? Like, have you taken aspirin, or what's going on? And the message was clear. Hey man, tough it up. That message doesn't stop as boys age. So I want to say this. We have an opportunity, guys, to reshape how we engage with men and boys. I'm a social worker, undergrad and graduate degrees, have done all kinds of research on this subject. When I think about what men want, there are three A's. There are three A's that males want. This is not going to be a slide, so you can write this down if you want to. The first A is appreciation. Men and boys do more of what's appreciated. Our language is different when it comes to boys. Stop running. Stop running. When you could easily say, walk. Our language when it comes to males has to be different. We're often cautioning them about what not to do, as opposed to telling them what to do. So when he does something that we're hoping, a behavior, a communication, a skill, when it's appreciated, you're more likely to get that repeated. For example, I make the best lasagna that you've ever tasted. And I don't know y'all, but I've won 27 awards for my lasagna. That don't make me the best. I'm not Chef Boyardee, but it's pretty decent. It's pretty decent. My first time making lasagna, I made it for my wife. Next month, we'll be married 25 years. I made the lasagna. I have to underscore this. I do not like tomatoes. You guys know in lasagna, you gotta put tomatoes or paste in there. So the first time I made it, we didn't have kids. We were living in Delaware, and I am trying to make this thing romantic, y'all. I made this lasagna with no sauce. My wife comes home from work. I'm so proud. It's got cheese now. Cheese is everywhere. Cheese is on the counter. Cheese is everywhere. She comes in and she commences to cut. Y'all know how to cut lasagna in that casserole dish. And it should not crunch, but my lasagna crunched because it didn't have sauce. So she lovingly takes a bite as I'm staring her down. Like, I know she's about to say, this is great. And she says two things to me. This is good. Listen to my words. She didn't say, but you didn't have tomatoes in it. She said, this is good. And she stopped right there. Her next sentence is one that we have to practice when it comes to work with men and boys. If she had said, but, you know, men receive feedback as criticism, depending on how it's conveyed. And when we're criticized, I'm talking about males, boys, when we're criticized, oftentimes, not all the time, we withdraw. So in this case, she said, this is good. And next time, if you can, add some tomatoes. I don't know what study she did, but somehow I heard that as this is good. I did hear that. And if you can, add some tomatoes. The next time I made lasagna, I did all that she asked. She came home, everybody who she calls on Sunday nights, her mother, her sister, her sister girlfriends, she was bragging about this lasagna. And y'all know, this is before Pinterest, I was Googling lasagna recipes. I was trying to find ways to make the best lasagna because she was so proud and so grateful that I had made this lasagna. She continued to say, this is good, babe, you're doing it. This is good. So appreciation. The second A of the 3 A's is acknowledgement. If you are working with a family, and this happens, I've seen it happen. I've done these mystery shopper explorations for DSS and other organizations where I've come in dressed down and watch how men and boys are treated. And a family comes in and everybody rushes to the cute little baby or girl, son. They will say to the mom, you look good, I like them earrings. And then to the guy, they'll say, sign this. Acknowledgement. Good morning, sir. What's your name? Acknowledgement is the second A. Really, really, really important. It doesn't cost you to do that. Affirmation is the last A. And here's where this comes into play. The sweetest sound that I've heard from my wife is, you're a good man. I feel affirmed. Somehow, some way, people will say things like, I'm using very bad English. I ain't gonna tell no man thank you for stuff he should be doing. I know y'all have heard that before. I was in Texas not long ago and I was in a training. This lady, she proudly said to me as she introduced herself, she says, I have 5 children and one of them is my husband. Y'all have heard that before. I'm pretty sure you have heard people say things like that. Unfortunately, I've been on the phone where the school has called for my oldest when she started having her menstrual cycle. And they would say, hey, this is the school. We'd like to speak to Peyton's mother. I say, well, I'm her father. You know, when you're upset, you have to smile so it doesn't come across crazy. I'm her father. Can I help you? Yeah, Peyton is in the nurse's office and she's not feeling well. We'd like to speak to her mother. Her father. Can I help you? But it's implicit bias. And the way that most organizations, this is not a bad thing, this is not a fault, this is the reality. The way that most organizations are developed, the way that they're cultured, it is families and fathers. Somewhat, they're not considered part of the family. But those 3 are really important. Appreciation, acknowledgement, and affirmation. If you have a male in your family or in your friend group, I promise you, if you text him, I appreciate you, I promise you he's gonna respond. This is not a scientific experiment. Last week I did a training for South Carolina DSS. And in the middle of that training, I encouraged them to do the same thing. One of our caseworkers from DSS, she texts me back. She texts her husband. She says, I need you. Her husband responded in the middle of the training. This lady was in tears. She said, my husband responded back, babe, wow, I needed that. She said, I had no idea. Acknowledgement, appreciation, affirmation. Really important, really important. The double bubble for males. And I'm gonna get into some activities. A couple other things. ACEs, you guys know what ACEs is. Childhood trauma. My father, as a boy, he and his brothers have told me different times that my grandfather, as a level of discipline or punishment, should I say punishment, he would strip them naked, put a pillowcase over their heads, and whip them with a piece of a water hose. Remember the Coke bottle I was talking about? My grandfather was known to slap his children in the face. Coke bottle, shaken. My dad's childhood, his 20s, his 30s, my guess is he was a shaken Coke bottle the entire time. One of the things I'm most grateful for is that my dad did not repeat those things with us. Super grateful. But those traumas tend to manifest in unhealthy behaviors for men and boys. I run a virtual fatherhood group every 2 weeks in Charlotte. All of the men that I'm working with are men who are unemployed, owe child support, and have issues with the mother of their children. For 2 years, I've not met a lot of these men, but I have been on Zoom on the same computer, and I've heard men divulge that they have been molested, that they have been raped, that they have been sodomized, that they have been beaten by their fathers or their mother's boyfriend or their mothers, that they have fractured, damaged relationships with their mothers. And then you hear him talk about, I have 3, I'm gonna use a plain term. We don't use this in our group, but I'm gonna use just for the purpose of today. I have 3 baby mamas. I could do what I wanna do. There is a connect between childhood trauma for boys and men, for boys, and how it manifests in men. This is not disconnected from our conversation about communication and being able to emote and share how you feel. A lot of men have a lot to say, but there's not a safe place to say it. One of my favorite proverbs that I use is you can't heal what you don't reveal. And for a lot of our men, they've not been able to reveal this stuff. So they find other ways to cope, which tends to be, not all the time. Some people work out really hard. A lot of guys will work excessively to keep that thing at a minimum. But other guys, if they don't have those positive outlets, I'm saying working out and working are positive, but they can be extremes, they will turn to drugs or having sex or multiple partners or violence, domestic violence, or drug use or criminal activities. A lot of these things they have no control over because they have not revealed what has been broken on the inside. Let me stop and just ask for a couple of people to drop in the chat one thing you've heard so far. One thing you've heard so far. It doesn't matter. There's no right or wrong answer. Something you've heard so far, either from me or that struck you from our first few minutes. The 3 A's, what males need most. When criticized, men withdraw. You can. Meaning affirmation. Beautiful, beautiful. Acknowledgement. Our language has to be different when talking to men and boys. The 3 A's. Yes. Need to be more appreciative and affirming of the men in our lives. Yes. Have y'all ever wondered why they call Spider-Man the Amazing Spider-Man? Why do they call the Hulk the Incredible Hulk? All of these are affirming words. I know it sounds crazy, but in context, it's important that we affirm these men. It's so important that we affirm our boys. When I do stuff, I say stuff, but work in schools, I have a contract I'm doing in Ohio with 3 juvenile prisons. All the young men in those institutions I have been working with for the last 3 years. And it's so important when I get to sit with them, and even via Zoom, I can't see them on Zoom, but they can see me. The stuff that they share when we listen is so important. But words matter. Thank you guys. I want to make sure you guys were tracking as I was going along. I'm gonna move into this last piece and I want to share a video right after we finish this. Did you know that many males are socialized to internalize? They're socialized to keep it all in. It's no wonder to me when you see these videos on YouTube or TikTok, when you see a guy emoting, it sounds like an animal that was shot, honestly, sometimes. It's because they've been holding it in for so long. All of us need to cry. All of us need to cry. Sometimes when a male says, I'm good, they're not. Really, really, really important we recognize that. Every man has a story. It wasn't until I heard about the traumas. My dad was a very dark-skinned man. He grew up in the 40s and 50s and 60s. You know what word was used when he walked into a store downtown. You know, when he walked down to USC's campus to pick up cans out of people's trash cans to make money, you know he was called all kinds of words. You know, those things, if they're not released, they just become poisonous on the inside. So I had to take a pause and just reflect on, wow, this man has been through Hades. And I mean that without cursing, in a positive way, but he has a story. My mother told me that my grandmother said to my father, and I love my grandparents, both of them are going on to heaven now, but I don't fault them because most parents do the best that they know how. But my mother told me that my grandmother said to her, my grandmother said to my mom, my dad's mom said to my mom, Pat ain't gonna be, it's 4 letters, starts with an S. It's cyclical. There's still people today that talk to boys like that. You just like your father. They're not saying that in a positive way. All men are the same. These are things that are in the atmosphere that condition humans, the public, but also bleed into our role as change agents. But every man has a story. My level of forgiveness shifted when I was encouraged by a pastor friend of mine who said to me, I did a keynote in Charleston, South Carolina. This is 15, 20 years ago. And I was doing the keynote talking about my father, and I was kind of making some sarcastic jokes about my dad. And I was saying the whole time, I'm good. Y'all hear what I just told you a second ago. I'm good. And afterwards, the pastor took me into his office. He said, let me talk to you for a second, Patrick. He said, you still mad at your dad? I said, no. I'm good. I'm good. Look at this green box. I'm good. He said, let me help you reframe how you think about your father. Because I told you guys, and I told that crowd the same story about my dad coming to my dorm. I told the story my dad coming to my intern. He said, you do realize your dad was still trying to stay connected to you, right? My brain at that point in my life did not compute in that manner. All I knew was I was hurt. I was upset. He said, you had your dad for 15 years, right? Is that what you said to me? I said, yeah. He said, I think you're in a situation where you're holding on to what you think you didn't get, but you've let go of what you did get from your father. Let me repeat it, because you're holding on to what you think you missed, but you've let go of what you did get from your father. All of my marriage, I've worked every day of my marriage. I've worked since I was 17. I've never been fired from a job. That's not like a token appreciation award, but I've always had work ethic. He reminded me, your dad, that didn't come out the air. My brothers and I, my dad used to cut our hair, military style. My hair is still similar. My dad would say to me, my brothers, you're gonna look like somebody when you leave out this house. Those are things that I had like evaporated from my memory because I was so focused on what I didn't get. But transformation came through forgiveness for me. And for a lot of people who are in the human services field, and I just know because of sheer numbers, there's a percentage of people who have wonderful, wonderful stories to share about their fathers or their husbands or their children's fathers. There's also a percentage of people who do not have that experience, neither of those experiences. And when you park your car in the front yard of your office or you log into your Zoom, those feelings of inept don't go away. Implicitly, they are transferred in our day-to-day practice. I could not be doing the work that I do if I had not done intensive work around forgiveness of myself, because I wasn't the best son, y'all, during those times. I didn't say the best things to my father. I'm not excusing myself, I was angry. But I did not know what to do with that besides lash out. And for a lot of our fathers, the best way that we've learned to release has been somewhat in violence or in anger, verbally. But Pastor Dallas, my pastor friend, he set me on a path in that brief conversation to forgiveness. He said, I'm gonna ask you to do one thing when you leave here. Ask your father what's his story. It took me 10 years to get to the question because I was still in my anger. But when I finally found out and heard my father, and I talked to Thad, I talked to my dad's brothers, and I heard about the traumatic stuff that my dad went through. It doesn't excuse anything, but it helps you understand what men and males go through. So when men say, I'm good, oftentimes they're not. Research says that there are more than 100 structural differences between male and female brains. This is not Patrick Patterson. I'm not a medical doctor. This is research. I put the citation at the bottom. You can Google it if you like. Why is this important? The way that you engage men has to be, and I don't do definites or absolutes. If you want to be effective, let me say it this way, has to be different than the way you engage with moms or females. The way that you communicate to them has to be different. I'm gonna share some strategies in a few minutes. Has to be different. If you believe that your flyer that has beautiful pictures of women and children is an invitation for a male or a man to come to your center, I want you to rethink that. If you believe that having an all-female staff is going to help connect with men, and I've told you about my mom, amazing, my wife, I have daughters. I love all the women that I've worked with. I'm a social worker. My days are filled with speaking with professional women. So please don't mistake what I'm saying as women are not adequate. What I am saying is people who come into your office like to see somebody that they initially think they can relate to. And I'm not just talking gender. I'm talking age. I'm talking ethnicity. I'm talking language. It's important that agencies that work with families also add male staff to the team. Men want to know one question when they come into the space. And you don't have to have gone through Hades to experience it, but can you relate? Do you understand? If there is a level that's set, that you have an appreciation and understanding of his journey, he's more willing to share. But if it appears that there is some level of judgment or disconnect from his journey, he's going to remain a recluse. Very, very, very important. Last couple of things, I'm going to show you a quick video. When males feel emotionally safe, they share their feelings and ask questions. When they don't feel emotionally safe, they won't. When our oldest was born, our doctor, her name was Dr. McWilliams. She was from Alabama. We were living in Delaware. We were so excited. We had a miscarriage. It took us 8 years before we had our first kid after the miscarriage. So we prayed for this. We labored for this. My wife did the heavy lifting, you know, but it was a blessing of blessings that our first child was born. And in most of our doctor's visits, we'd go into the office and Dr. McWilliams my wife takes notes. Everything we do, she has a notebook that goes with it. We're traveling, we're doing this, she has a notebook. So she would come in with Dr. McWilliams and my wife would go through the list. She's not burping. She's not drinking the milk. She's not latching on, you know, it's a list, it's a notebook. And then after she finished, Dr. McWilliams would answer all those questions. She would say to me, Patrick, what are your questions? And I would say, I don't have any questions. She said, no. You and Shirani, my wife, have the same title, parent. She says, so I want to hear your questions. What are your questions? And I would say, when can we put her in the bassinet? Or something like that. And she would say, oh, that's a great question. Why am I saying this? She gave me permission to be safe. She never said, oh, that's a dumb question. Oh, no. We're not gonna entertain that. She gave me permission to share and ask questions. She reinforced it with her words. If you haven't heard me speak throughout this last hour, one of the most important things that you can offer are encouraging words to men and boys. My extreme example is the obvious, don't run, when you can easily say walk. It's the same goal. But encouragement is really important. But when they feel safe, when we feel safe, we share. And I'll share with you a couple different ways to do that. Men and boys want solutions too. And then there are a lot of lonely men and boys. I started a Facebook group just before the pandemic. It had nothing to do with the pandemic. I live in North Carolina, in Wake Forest. I'm from South Carolina. And I started a Facebook page called Carolina Fathers. And I started because I had a really good friend of mine who, he and his wife, they have 3 boys. They were getting divorced. And I was driving from Wake Forest to Columbia, 3 hours. And when he called me, y'all, he had been telling about his wife for a while. He's been upset. He's been angry. He's, just going through stuff. And every time he get on the phone with me, I just allow him to release. And on this particular call, he was like, I'm good, bro. He said, I'm good. I said to him two things. I said, first, I said, it's okay to say you're hurt. He said, I'm good, Pat. I said, pause for a second. I said, it's okay to say you're hurt. You good with me. Translation, if you don't know what that means, I ain't gonna tell nobody. The next 2 hours, this man from his belly was screaming how he wanted to be with his sons. He grew up without his father. He grew up in Philadelphia. He wanted to break the cycle, and now he's repeating the cycle. He feels like he let his wife down because he wasn't the best husband. I mean, he went on and on and on, but he had to acknowledge that he was hurt. So the Facebook page, after that conversation, I was emotionally just overwhelmed with how I felt like he just needed that moment to share. So I started the page, had no idea. It was just going to create a safe space for guys to share things. And today we have a little more than 4,000 men who are on the page. When I look at our analytics for the Facebook group, we have more than 16,000 conversations per week. People say men don't talk. That's a myth. And guys share things like, my daughter's going to the prom. How should I greet her, her date? I was molested. It's amazing to me. It's a safe space. It's just guys in there. But the stuff that men have shared in the group, from encouraging words to just kind of help me figure this out, has been powerful. But it recognizes the point that there are a lot of lonely men and boys. All right. Let me stop for a second. And I want to check the chat box, if you would, Hannah. And then I want to share a video. So I'm going to stop my screen and I'll toss it to you to check the chat box and share anything that you've had or any questions that have come up.
So we've just gotten a couple of comments about, how amazing the Facebook group is, and just that they're enjoying this presentation thus far. But does anyone have any questions? Oh, here's one from Michelle. How do you get past the wall in the beginning?
Which, the wall with guys, you're saying, Michelle?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important when you think about how we got here. She says to allow vulnerability. How we got here, the word that I know that most people hate, from working out and wanting results, to eating healthy and wanting results, to dating and working with men, this word is important, is the word patience. It is so important that we recognize, if you're dealing with a 14-year-old or a 35-year-old, that what you're hoping to break in terms of this wall will not happen overnight. We are, in some cases, not establishing, but reestablishing trust for a lot of these guys. When I have guys say to me, I was molested, I was molested, I typically allow space to breathe. I don't say, oh, you're fine, or man, that's crazy. Allowing him to feel safe is sometimes being silent. Sometimes it's just allowing him to share. But patience is one. The second one I would add in response is giving him words of affirmation. Now, they have to be genuine. Guys have a pretty good sense of if this is real or fake. A lot of guys, not all guys. But affirmation helps, y'all. Man, I appreciate you sharing that, brother. You're good with me. Those are words that kind of create safety. If you have a man or male, a boy that shares something deep with you, Trust me, he went through mental Olympics before he did that. He thought about it hard. It doesn't randomly just pop out. He's been thinking about it. But I will tell you, if you share that, you're done. And I mean in a bad way. The relationship that you are trying to build is done because we trust differently. Y'all have heard in relationships, and I don't want to go too far off track. People will ask if a guy is with a young lady or with a partner and there's infidelity, why don't men go back? A lot of partners, females, will go back on occasions. And this is a very extreme generalization. But males would say, oh, I'm done. Because our level of trust and the way that we guard our hearts is because of how we've been socialized in many respects. But it also has a lot to do with how we were raised. If you Google mother-son conflict, and you don't have enough time to read the dynamics that play out between mothers and sons. And it's not a bad thing. I won't even go into detail about my mom and how wonderful she is, but she and I have had conflict in the spaces where I wanted her to be affirming. She did what was done to her. One of the largest steps that we can make as we approach working with males is to do self-awareness. Where am I? Am I in a healthy space? Do I say things like I have 4 children and one of them is my husband? Do I laugh at that when I hear that? Do I say to guys, suck it up, man up, stop being a blah, blah, blah? Y'all know what a blah, blah, blah is? Self-awareness is critical when it comes to how we work with males. But patience, to answer your question, is the first thing that I would say, patience, all right? I'm gonna share a quick video and I want you guys to answer one question in the chat box when I stop playing the video. What did you hear? Quick video. One question to think about as I share this video is what did you hear? Now let me set it up for context. This video is really targeting women in relationships with men. But I want you to just remove that for 1 second and think about how this applies to working with males, because it's speaking about how to get men to become emotionally safe. So one question, what did you hear? Take away the context of this, the audience of moms or wives or dating partners he's talking to, and think about how this applies to your work with males. What did you hear is the question. And Ashley or Hannah, if you can, I can't see you guys, just say yes if you can hear it.
Man feels safe.
Yes, you
in
can hear it.
relationship.
Awesome.
Welcome back. Matt Schaefer, your connection, empowerment, and relationship coach here. I love supporting women in creating more fulfilling, dynamic, connected relationships with themselves and also with men. And today we're going to talk about how to really help a man feel safe and connected in a relationship. And this is something that I get asked about a lot on my YouTube channel and a lot by my clients. So I'm excited to dive into it with you. Before we do, take a second, hit that little subscribe button. I'm uploading new content every week and you're gonna wanna know when it happens. So let's unpack this. And I wanna start by making a pretty bold statement that both men and women need to feel safe in relationship. I know a lot of what you've probably heard out there and what you've read out there is that women are the ones that need to feel safe, right? That women need physical safety from men. They need men to provide that physical container and create that safety for them to be in their emotions. Well, here's the interesting thing is that just as women crave and desire physical safety and a container for them to express their emotions, the biggest way that you can actually create deep connection with a man is by providing him with a container for him to be emotionally safe. So for him to be vulnerable, for him to drop his guards and share his fears. So many men have been told and conditioned that accessing and sharing their feelings is weakness. So for them, it's a very scary thing, the possibility of being vulnerable, of sharing what's in their heart. And most importantly, talking about what they're afraid of. That's actually a very difficult thing for a lot of men to do. And men are either consciously or subconsciously, they are craving that from women. So your man is at some level, he's craving that sense of safety. He's craving a space where he can drop his walls and he can be emotionally vulnerable with you and share those parts of himself, those feelings, those fears, those emotions that he can't share with his guys. Like a man has people in his life, right? He's got buddies that he can talk to about lots of stuff. He can talk to them maybe about relationship things. He can talk to them about work stuff. But those deep feelings, men either are unwilling or unable to talk about it with their buddies. And so you as a woman, you get to be an example of emotional agency. And so here's what we get to do. In order to create that feeling of safety for a man, in order to allow him to feel like you're a space and that your relationship is a container where he can be vulnerable, you get to lead the way. And I talk about this a lot when I talk about a woman being the emotional and communicative conductor in a relationship. And this is one of the greatest ways that you can foster that sense of emotional safety in him. You get to lead the way and be the conductor for him in terms of feelings and create this safe space by being vulnerable yourself. You give him permission to drop his walls and be emotionally vulnerable with you by you leading the way and you being emotionally vulnerable with him. So share your feelings, share your fears in a gentle, loving, and open way, and help him see that you're willing to do it. And then ask him, right? Ask him how he's feeling. Elicit those responses from him. Get him to look at them, because there's a good chance that nobody really asks him how he's doing. Nobody really asks him how he's feeling. They only ask about what he's been up to. They ask him about the actions of his life. They ask him about the results of his life. And they don't take the time to really dig in and have him reflect on his feelings. And men, for the most part, unless they're actively doing inner work, they're not going to be reflecting on their feelings, inquiring about their own feelings, or trying to observe and understand their own feelings. So there's a huge opportunity for you to develop deeper connection with your man by leading the way with your own vulnerability and your own openness and your own heart-centered style of communication, and then asking him questions to help get the same from him, help draw it out of him, help evoke these feelings and this reflection from him. And if you can do that in a loving and inviting way, you're going to help him feel safe to share his emotions, because you want to know them. Not only is the space safe, but you genuinely are desiring those thoughts and feelings from him. Because that's another thing men can do. They'll talk themselves out of sharing their feelings because they don't think anybody cares about their feelings, right? People only care about what a man is doing, what a man's creating, and what his legacy is or whatever. So recognize that in your power to be the emotional and communicative conductor and your ability to make a man feel safe emotionally, you have a huge opportunity to deepen your connection with him and help him access parts of himself and create a new understanding for himself that he might not otherwise ever do. To bring this all home in a nutshell, men are craving emotional and communicative safety from you the way that you're craving physical safety and stability from them. So if you can lead the way and demonstrate what it means to be emotionally and communicatively vulnerable, and then help them feel that you actually want to hear about their feelings, you will help them drop these walls they've got around their heart and drop these walls they've got around that anybody wants to hear what they have to say. And they'll actually start to open up, they'll start to feel safe, and they'll start to share with you those deepest things in their hearts, right? And then once they do that, you will have created a deeper level of connection, a deeper level of intimacy, and it'll be profoundly healing for both of you. So I hope this resonated with you. If it did, take a second, hit that little subscribe button, and I will see you next time on my YouTube channel.
What did you hear? I love that video, by the way. I love that video. What did you hear? Trisha says, men on This Is Us. Example of relationships where men have women willing to create container for safety and openness for both to share in vulnerability with love. People are more likely to ask men about their actions of their life than their feelings. That's from Sophia. Gloria says, men crave a sense of safety. Women have a huge opportunity to model emotional vulnerability and then ask the question most don't ask: How do you feel instead of focusing on action and results in his life? Retta says men need to feel emotionally safe. Men want to feel safe, heard. They also have feelings. This is Tanya. This is good, y'all. Keep them coming. This is powerful when it comes to, and I want to paint the context because a lot of this applies to boys as well. I know we're talking about, this video specifically was talking about in the context of men, but our boys have the same desires. Denise says equality. Marla says women have to help men feel safe. It's so important, y'all, that we think about the level of need that our males face. And this is not over women. This is not in place of women. We're talking about fathers and men and boys today. But there's a huge opportunity for us to engage more deeply with these guys. But safety is paramount. Gloria says men are human as well. Saralyn, hope I said your name right, Saralyn. Agree, apples to boys applies, excuse me, apples. Y'all know I'm hungry, right? Applies to boys and all children. Elizabeth says we actually have a lot more needs in common than I thought. Yeah. Estelle says men want to feel safe. So I think about the conversation. This is an awesome opportunity for us to think about how we get guys to a place where they feel safe and willing to share. I didn't share this with Hannah and Trish earlier, but I witnessed domestic violence in my house. My mother, God bless her, my father would come home from those 3 jobs, and my mother and him would have gotten into an argument about something. I don't know. Our apartment was very, very small, but my father would, whatever the situation was, my mother knew it was about to happen. He would come in the house. My mother would willingly bring us downstairs. She'd willingly then walk back upstairs, knowing full and well she was about to get beaten by my father. After the beating, and imagine sitting downstairs trying to watch TV with your brother, and I think about our body language at the time, we were typically coiled during this time. My mother, after those situations, would come back downstairs and fix dinner for us, including my father. My mother was somewhat fair-skinned, and it was not hard to see that she had bruises on her. I don't excuse the behavior, so please let me state that fact. I do not excuse the behavior. When I think about where my father's life ended, a lot of things came out about the Coke bottle syndrome that has him upset. Now, not excusing it, but those behaviors are not manifested out of the air. Unfortunately, there was also, at that time, societal belief that was okay for a lot of people. I'll just say in my community, it was okay, it was normal. People could hear it in that apartment. People next door could hear it. It was not unusual that happened on different parts of our block. In our building, there were 10 units. That was not the only time that we heard a woman getting beat on. But when I think about healing and forgiveness, there are levels that we have to go beneath the surface to address for a lot of our men. When I've done things on battles intervention programs, there's a lot of people who split one or both sides about whether a male, can be reformed or changed or enlightened or healed from it. None of us are totally going to be healed from our traumas, none of us. But you can get better. You can learn new skills. It's proven that you can do that. But my father was one of those guys. And when I think about the safety that was required, I would think to myself, during his formative years, he was walking around in unsafe areas like all around him. All around him. Michelle says creating a space requires safety first for the space holder and the receiver. Yeah, I'm going to guess my father didn't have a safe space to share. It wasn't a barbershop. His father dang sure didn't want to hear, I don't feel well. But that's so important that we think about how this looks. So I'm coming to a close. I got a couple more things I want to share with you guys, and then I'll stop for a few minutes more questions. So 2 critical assessment questions. If you're working with men and boys, these are 2 questions that are critical to your assessment. If you're a social worker, human service professional, you're doing work directly with families and you work with men and boys. I've been in Lee Correctional. You guys remember some years ago, unfortunately, there was a major melee at Lee Correctional in Bishopville, and 7 individuals lost their lives. For 3 years after that, I worked in that prison, doing counseling, doing group sessions, and the guys that we worked with were some of those guys that were involved. And the people in my life who feared for me going in there were like, why would you put yourself in that situation? But here's what I understood going in, and here's what I know even more deeply now. All of those guys have a story. All of them have a story. It's depending upon whether you want to engage and hear, listen, or help them. Some of us make judgments and we just can't do it. Can't not muster talking to a person who's been violent or done something against somebody else. But in the space of social services, social work, change agent, the work that we do, belief that a person can change and learn new things is foundational. Very, very, very important. One of my favorite songs by Lauryn Hill, and this is from her 1996 album, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. In her song, she says, how you gonna win if you ain't right within? And what that means is a lot of us have to do our own assessment about our engagement and our appreciation of men and boys. There are people who don't have the best experience, and rightfully so, that translates to how they work with men. That's why they're so quick to say, suspend him, get him out of here, lock him up. He can't be helped. Those are deep, deep-seated feelings that have a history attached to them. And this is not talking to women, this is males and females. I've been with men who don't like men. I didn't like men for a while. When my father and I were going through our stuff, when I was in McDonald's and saw a guy sitting with his kids, I usually got my stuff and left. I didn't want to be there because I was that emotionally drained by that picture. So these 2 questions. Is he broke or broken? Critical, you don't have to ask that question, but it's critical to have that in your assessment backpack as you're talking to a male. Is he broke or broken? Broke, we can fix typically with employment and some financial literacy skills. Broken is a lot deeper. The second question, is he angry or hurt? Anger and hurt are 2 different things. So as we're working with males, fathers, men, boys, those 2 questions are pivotal to how you approach your work with him. Is he broke or broken? And is he angry or hurt? Here's a framework I want you to think about as we talk about working with men and boys. There are several other factors, but here are the dominant factors that must be present when working with men and boys. The first one is respect. Now, I like to say, I kind of give what I get back. But when I've worked with men who've been incarcerated or who've been down in their luck, I've done work with the NFL, the NBA. I've been around guys who have more money than they can count. My first action is to extend respect. How you doing, Mr. Smith? Even for guys younger than me. How you doing, Mr. Smith? Man, call me Joe. okay? But I'm gonna start off by extending respect to him first. Men often view respect as love. What are ways that we can show respect? Calling him by his name. Before COVID, some of us are kind of out of the COVID fear, but I'd often extend a hand to shake a hand when I'm working with men and boys. Eye contact. Now, culturally speaking, there are parts of South Carolina where people just don't look you in the eye. I'm not asking you to make them look in the eye, but there's several ways that we can extend and show respect. But at the first line of engagement is respect. When I call a guy and I got his cell phone number, I will say, hey, John, is this a good time? That's a sign of respect. So giving consideration for him and his activities is really important. You're also modeling respect. It's very important. Active listening, listening more than we talk. And a lot of my sessions with the guys that we do, particularly the guys in Charlotte, my job is to facilitate. Very rarely do I dump a bunch of solutions on them. I listen, encourage, guide, but a lot of it is active listening. Permission to feel. When I told you about my friend, and I said to him, it's okay to say you're hurt. I was giving him permission. Giving him permission verbally. Sometimes it's not even verbally, sometimes it's just silence. Silence is also a sign of permission. When you know you feel that lump that my dad had in his throat, if given time, he probably would have processed that without an audience. But permission to feel, healing. It's not often talked about because it seems spiritual. It is. But in spaces that we're in working with men and boys, healing is so critical. There are a lot of hurt boys that we encounter every day. A lot of hurt men. Anger versus hurt. Remember the question. A lot of hurt men and boys that we deal with every day. And we're wondering, like, why is he acting out in class again? It's some anger, but it's a byproduct of his hurt. Non-judgmental approach. So I've been, unfortunately, in rooms where a guy walks in and someone will say to him, look what the wind blew in. Or speak of the devil. I know folks don't say that anymore, but these are things that extend judgment to guys. One of my favorite examples is in one of our virtual classes in Charlotte. One of the guys joined, he's a barber, followed us. He's a barber. We get on Zoom. He's got his phone set up someplace in the barbershop while he's cutting a client's hair. And as he's talking to us, he's got the earpiece in his ear and he's, being professional while on the job. And we always say to the guys, when you join in, introduce yourself any way you want to. Because I'm trying my best to make sure he's comfortable. So this guy comes on, first time he's on the class. He says, hey, my name is such and such, and I have 10 children by 10 different women. And I said, welcome to the group. He said, can you hear me? He said, can you hear me? Can you hear me? I said, yes. He said, I have 10 children by 10 different women. I said, welcome to the group. My read on that exchange was typically when he says that to somebody, there is a, oh my, there's a whole series of comments that he's heard. So the conversation proceeded. There are other guys in the group. He finishes cutting his client's hair. He goes to his car. I'm on camera at the time. He's not on camera. He gets on camera. He says, hey, my name is such and such. I was the one cutting hair. I wasn't sure you can hear me. He said, can you see me? I said, I can see you. He said, did you hear what I said? I said, yeah, we are. I said, welcome to the group. This guy has been with us for about a year. He's continued, and he's long graduated, guys. He's continued to come back because we have done our very best. We're not perfect at this. Our very best to not extend judgment on guys. The guy's not working. People, what kind of man are you? Those are things that people have been conditioned to say, not you, but in society, people will say things like that to a guy who's not working. Non-judgmental approach, really important. And then the last one I said earlier in response to a question I received was patience. When you combine these factors, it creates an environment for growth for males and boys. Now, do they all happen instantly? No. This is probably 30 years of work that this field around men and boys has been really full force, when there's 100+ years of the opposite experience for guys. So I always encourage folks, you know, all these things are like goals for me. When I meet with guys, and this is a strategy that I use, I will typically set a goal for each interaction. Sometimes my goal is to just listen. I will intentionally, if I'm getting a phone call from a guy, my goal is to listen. If I'm talking to a guy and I know he needs to get connected to a resource, my goal is to make sure he gets connected to the resource. Sometimes my goal is to communicate slowly. All of these things help when it comes to guys. Very, very, very important. All right. Men need to know it's okay to cry, to need support. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to go to therapy. I can't even tell you how many comments I got from friends and frat brothers when I said I was going to go to counseling. You all know the list of things I heard, but it's so refreshing to see that others are doing it. The society that we live in now is becoming more acceptable. When you have professional athletes talking about mental health and counseling or anxiety or depression, it's granting permission, y'all. Said that word again. Men need to know it's okay to not be okay. A lot of us have been trained to say, I'm good. Everything's cool. I'm all right. But those are things that we have to give guys permission to feel. It's okay to talk about your feelings. And then at the very top, it's okay to ask for help. A lot of our guys don't believe that people want to help them because of how they've been conditioned and socialized. So it's super important we think about that. Let me close with this question. Fill in the box. Our agency, or if you're not working for an agency, agencies would serve more males if we, fill in the box, if we Margaret says, if we knew about them, had males on staff by sharing. It's awesome. Put out more literature on male survivors. Worked on opening up better lines of communication. Gave more attention to meeting them where they are. I love that. Cleartis, I hope I'm saying that right. I apologize if I'm not. It's entering in our staff. We have no males for unknown reasons. This is Gloria. Cleartis, I said it right. Yes, I feel good. In my James Brown voice. Hired more people that look like them. Speak more to their experience and encourage them it's okay to come forward. Show that men can be victims of DV2. That is very, very, very unpopular, but it's real, y'all. I know some guys who've been through the ringer. Male staff. Really important that we think about that simple of an action can transform how your agency works. I would add training. I'm so grateful that you guys are here for this conversation. It's not even a training, it's a conversation. But I'm grateful that you guys are here because it's super important that we think about how we build our men, how we build our boys. It's really, 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 really important. So I'm going to close out with these last couple slides, and then I'll toss it back to you, Hannah, to facilitate any questions that we may have. If you were to use your chat box, let's talk about strategies now, in the last few minutes. I want you to look at all the green. Those are numbers, obviously. I want you to put in the chat box from your experience or what you believe, what would be the top 2 things that would lead to male engagement that is culturally relevant, includes competition, mandated, daytime hours only. Just pick 2 numbers Non-judgmental, uses audio-visual aids, interactive and activity-based, a hearty meal is served, expensive, easily accessible, ends early or on time, or lecture-based. Just pick two. There's no right or wrong answer that you think would be the most beneficial that would generate positive male engagement. And if you would, Hannah, give me some of what you're seeing in the chat box as they're coming in.
Yeah, so we have 5 and 10, 8 and 7, 1, 5 and 7, 1 and 10, 5 and 10, 1 and 5, a lot of 5 and 10s, 8 and 7. What else do we have? More 5 and 10s. We've got a 1 and 10.
Yes, I love that.
5 and 12.
I love it. Anybody pick 3? Did you see anybody pick 3?
I haven't seen anyone pick 3 yet.
You guys know why. That was my SAT prep. You're always going to have one question that people won't respond to. Mandated is often used, but not as effective. There are occasions, and I've done parenting classes in both South and North Carolina for mandated parents. And by the end of 12 weeks, there's typically rapport and relationship and, you know, some things that people will appreciate. But those first 5 weeks, it's arms folded, legs folded. I ain't saying nothing for the next hour. But what I've learned and what we've learned is that men, boys, like a lot of these things. I heard a lot of 5 and 10s, non-judgmental and easily accessible. There's a middle school in Columbia. We've done for the last 5 months a mentoring program with 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. And we started off by asking them to name the group. And it was funny because these were if you just follow these numbers, 90% of the 10% of referrals, these are these kids. Referrals for suspension or expulsion. 90% of that 10% of that student body, these are the kids I'm working with. And in 5 months, we've talked about healing. We have practiced meditation. We have explained meditation. We've talked about you don't have to be somebody else. You can be yourself. We've talked about self-love. We've talked about mental health. I mean, God bless my kids and kids that are their age. It's a fact they're growing up in a different time than we did. I didn't have as much to think about or opinions to think about, but they are consumed by everything that's social media, social engagement. It's a different time for our kids. And so it's so important that we think about non-judgmental. These kids have, you guys, if you watch professional sports, athletes will often do these series of handshakes where you're like, how do you remember all this stuff? But these kids will greet us with different handshakes. But it's all a level of engagement, Number 2 is competition. A lot of our project activities, we do timed in groups. And typically all the groups get something, but it's encouraged that we have some level, not everybody, but a lot of our boys are competitive. A lot of males are competitive, not all, a lot of them are competitive. Women are as well. But in this space, we found that competition drives for them learning. It shifts behavior. I heard at least a couple people say 1, and culturally relevant is important. I said it earlier, but a lot of people might not believe this, but it's refreshing to me. I'll never forget, I was in Mongolia a couple of years ago doing some training at a university there. And when I arrived for 4 days, I didn't see any other African Americans. I saw only Asian families, I was in Asia. And then I went to this restaurant and there was a Black guy working there. I didn't know this man from Adam, as my mother used to say, but I was so like, what's up? Hey, what's going on? And he didn't speak English. But there is something about seeing yourself when you walk into an agency. So that's a critical piece when you think about culturally relevance. And everybody who looks like you doesn't know how to work with you. So I don't want to make that blanket statement. You want to have people who are trained, but also skilled in the work that they're doing. But being culturally, embracing someone's culture, embracing their uniqueness or our differences is when I mean culturally relevant. The last one I think that's really important I'll point out is number 7, interactive and activity-based. In most of our groups, the way that I have asked a couple questions, and you guys have been phenomenal in using the chat box, I am oftentimes up late at night thinking of questions and ways to create safety for our guys. I did a training last week in Kentucky, and this is framed a certain way, y'all, but it was a fatherhood training around implicit bias. And the way that we titled it was The Biases of Good People. Intentionally framed it in such a way. I'm a social worker with strengths-based, intentionally in such a way that people would not be turned off by signing in to the training. That requires a different pattern of thought for a lot of us. But it's super important that we think about how that looks. All right. Last thing I want to talk about is working with boys and men and boys, things that work. And then I will close with kind of my father and I's story at the end. Learn his name and call him by it. It's an extreme sign of respect. Super important. Foster emotional safety in your relationship. When you work with men or boys, all the things that you guys have discussed and shared brilliantly in the chat box, you also heard through the video, there's several ways to foster that. One of them that I heard in the video was just divulging things yourself. Now, disclosure has to be timed with purpose. You don't immediately say, I was incarcerated too, the first minute you speak to somebody. You want to make sure that there is a purpose behind it. You know, there are things that I've gone through in life that I don't share for a year because it's not appropriate. But when I know that there's a place where he needs and will benefit from me understanding that experience, I will share it. But it's not the first thing. I failed 9th grade. That's real. I failed 9th grade. When I work with these young men in Ohio, that's not the first thing that I say to them. But I've had guys who, you know, the moment is there. They think, wow, you got these degrees and la, 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 la. You're like, well, wait a minute. I failed 9th grade too. You failed 9th grade? Yes. Fostering emotional safety is important. Work to manage your facial expressions and body reactions. This is a little bit different, but there's nothing worse than you telling somebody without words, you don't believe them. And y'all know the faces that we make when somebody's telling you a story and you're looking at them like, something in this milk ain't clean. Really important to manage that. That also extends judgment. So be very intentional about how you show up, particularly in Zoom experiences or Teams, how you show up. Use non-judgmental approach and words. Listen to understand, not to respond. A lot of people, for fathers, men, and boys, have already preconceived what they're going to say to him when he's telling his story or he's talking. Make no assumptions or promises. I've seen programs that will say, Patrick, if you do these 4 things, I promise you we can blah, 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 blah. You're building trust. And y'all know how agencies work. Things change out of your control. If you get him going in a direction and you got him running towards that thing, and then what you told him he would get at the end, he doesn't. He might not brag about how good you are, but if you do that, he's going to brag about that. He's going to tell people, don't go down there. They're going to tell you one thing, but do another. And then number 7 is honest self-assessment. This is my Lauryn Hill, how you going to win? if you ain't right within. Find a way to assess how you feel about working with men. I didn't say this in the very beginning, but this work is not for everybody. It's not for every male. I know people like to hire males to work with males. Every male is not right for this. Honest self-assessment. Did I love my father, or do I have issues with my father? I never met my father. How do I hate my father. I wish my father was dead. I've heard people say these kind of things. My father let me get abused. These are unresolved things that people carry, and with professional degrees at the highest level, that does not change those things. So honest self-assessment. Everybody who says they can work with men or boys, it's not the case. So I always encourage, if you're going to hire people to work with men, that you do your very best to listen to their story. If you hear them say things like all men are the same, probably not a good sign. Probably not a good sign. Things that don't work. Over talking him, put downs, yelling, dismiss, oh, that don't make sense. Oh, never mind what he's, dismissing his point of view or his opinion, ignoring issues or silent treatment. I've unfortunately been around people who work in this industry and they have goals to meet that are agency goals, and some guy didn't get a job or he didn't apply for enough jobs, and he messed up this person's bonus. And the guy starts calling you back. He wants to get back, and people say things like, how am I gonna let him feel me? He gonna feel this because he just messed up my bonus. So they don't return his call for a week and a half. You've been calling him, now he's finally calling you back a month later. You know, he can wait. Those are things that are typically deeper than just what I'm describing. Making threats, if you don't do this, then this bad thing will happen to you, doesn't work. You heard that in the video as well, but it doesn't work. So using fear to change behavior in life doesn't work, because once people get past, that's all, they're going to continue or go worse with their behaviors. And then sarcasm. There's so many bad jokes that people say about men and women as well, but we're talking about fathers of men and boys. You do know that everything that I think is funny is not funny to you, and vice versa. So in my relationships with men and boys, some of these things can be triggers. You know, I'm 5'6". I spent many of my years formatively. I can tell you every short joke that you ever thought you heard. I'm dark skinned. I can tell you about a myriad of dark skinned, I'm using air quotes, jokes, but sarcasm is not a strategy when looking to engage men. I'll close with this, and I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, and then I'll toss it to you, Hannah, for any opening. My father and I, for the last 6 years of his life, reconnected. We stayed in touch, and it was seasonal. My dad's in his late life, he still drank and ran the streets, and then he got sick. All that running and wear and tear on his body got him sick. And so he was not doing really well for the last 6, 7 years of his life. And then I lived in Delaware for 15 years, my wife and I and our kids. I'll never forget this day. My father went from a treatment facility to hospice. And I didn't know hospice was not a stop on the journey, it's the last stop on the journey. And I tell you this story because it's the power of forgiveness and how grateful I am for my journey. And why I said in the beginning, my father's my reason for doing this work. But I've told you about the horrific journey that I went on with him in those formative years. But those last 6 or so years, my dad and I started talking on a regular basis. My dad would helped me with things. I remember going to Washington, D.C. with my dad. My brothers and I drove up to D.C. I remember having conversations. I remember the I love yous. I remember him saying to me 2 words. He said, I apologize. This is one of these serious man-to-man conversations. He says, son, I apologize. And if you have ever heard that sincerely from somebody who has hurt you, for some reason, all the venom and anger that I felt, I don't know, it went away. Feels like I gained wings when I heard that from him, because I was hurt and angry for a long time. But I masked it with the Robin Williams face. I got through graduate school, all honors. I went through undergrad. I worked in the White House. I've done a lot of great things. And even during those periods, I was still navigating my emotions around my father. And at the end of his journey, I was coming back and forth to Columbia to see my dad at this hospice facility. My father was not doing so well. So on this particular day, my wife and kids and I were vacationing in Baltimore. And my younger brother called me and said, my nickname is Cootie. Don't repeat that, y'all. He said, Cootie, I never heard this before, so I'm just sharing it because maybe you have. But the doctor said, Dad is ready to die. And I had just seen him 2 weeks before. Dad is ready to die, but he's waiting on somebody. Y'all ever heard this? So I'm like, okay. He said, I'm in Baltimore. He said, if you can, no pressure, but you want to come home as fast as you can. So for 3 days, my dad had not eat, drank, or opened his eyes, nor spoken. 3 days prior to this phone call. I knew he was failing, but I didn't know it was this intense. So my brother says to me, if you can, get home. So thank God for my wife, because we left, if you know geography, Baltimore is south of Delaware. So we left Baltimore. I'm driving up with the kids. My kids are younger. And my wife is booking a flight for me. Well, if you live in Delaware, there's an airport in Philadelphia and there's an airport in Baltimore. So we left Baltimore. I drove home for an hour. I come back to the airport in Baltimore. And my wife, meanwhile, she's saying, how you feeling? I said, I'm good. Remember that word, y'all. I said, I'm good. So y'all know I wasn't good. So my father is in this like last days state. Fast forward, I get on the flight. It takes me 10 hours to get home. I ended up landing in Charlotte. And if you know geography, it's about 1 hour and 15 from Charlotte to Columbia. So I'm hustling. Get to the airport, driving home. My brothers picked me up from the airport, and we're all in the car laughing and joking because we're all good. My brothers just left the facility that my dad was in. They're coming to get me to take me to the facility. We drove past the facility, y'all. Turn around. My mother, God bless her, she's the oldest of 16. She clears the room. She said, let Cootie see him. So I walk into the room, y'all. My father is typically 190 pounds. He's about 110. This is in a matter of weeks. He's just dropping. So I walk in, and my dad hasn't eaten, drank, opened his eyes, spoken in 3 days. And I walk in, I do this, whew, and I put my hand in his hand. As I'm holding his hand, I just got in there. My dad opens his eyes. He didn't turn his neck because he's frail, but he looked over at me with his eyes, and I said to him, I love you. One tear dripped down my dad's face while I was holding his hand. And my dad expired in that 5 minutes that I was there. It took me 10 hours to be there. When I say I'm grateful for my father and our journey, we had our I'm sorries, we had our I love yous. This work requires healing, y'all. If you are a person that has a fractured relationship with anyone, but particularly a male in your circle, your family, it's never too late. If you have had fractured relationship with boys in your family, nephews, sons, cousins, the affirmation piece is real. I would just encourage you and challenge you as you embark upon more of what you've been doing. When it comes to men, it's never too late. It's never too late. So I'll stop and I'll toss it to you, Hannah, to open it up for any, I know we're at time, for any questions or comments or things. And I will say before she does that, just drop a word in the chat box to describe what you heard from yourselves as well as from myself during this training. Any feedback would be great. So I'll stop and toss it to you, Hannah.
Well, first of all, just thank you so much, Patrick, for all of that. But some of the words people are sharing are powerful, empowering, inspiring, informative, meaningful, needed, which I definitely agree with. But does anyone have any questions for Patrick? Patrick, I don't know if you're looking at the chat right now, but everyone is just saying how much they really enjoyed this.
Oh, well, thank you. I can't see it,
Yes.
but I'll take a look.
Yes, they're just thanking you and saying how much this has meant to them. So I don't believe there are any questions. So I will, first I just want to thank everyone for joining us today for this presentation. Thank you all for coming. Again, if there's any questions, please feel free to drop those in the chat. But I will turn this over to Ashley to sign us off.
I'll put my information in the chat box too for.
Yes, please.
Well, thank you so much to Patrick for that really great webinar. I know we had some really great participation in the chat, so thank you to all of our attendees for that as well. That's probably maybe the most chat participation I have ever seen. So it was super engaging and people had some really great thoughts and insights. So that was a really lovely experience. I just wanted to go over a couple of housekeeping things before we close out. So first, I want to go ahead and share some of our upcoming webinars and events. So I'm going to quickly share my screen here and I'll be dropping, let me open the chat. I'll be dropping these links in the chat for you as we go. So our next SCCADVASA event is our Midlands Immigrant Victim Coalition meeting. It is virtual, so if you are not in the Midlands but would still like to attend, anybody's welcome to attend this session. So it will be focused on immigration law and policy updates for immigrant victims of crime. So if you work with immigrant communities, this would be a great training for you to attend. So here's the first, actually, let me just put all the links at the same time. Here's all the links for what I'm about to show you. The next one is on June 14th. We've got a member to member call. So these are our members only calls that are for all of our member organization staff. You do have to be logged into Coalition Manager to register for this one. This one is where do we go from here, supporting the needs of criminalized survivors, and we will hear from multiple speakers about supporting criminalized survivors through the lenses of a prosecutor and a defense attorney. So we're really excited about that. And that will be on June 14th. And then the last one coming up is our next webinar series webinar. So that's on June 24th. It's called The Power of 3: Services, Safety, and Sanctuary for BIPOC Students. And we will be talking about strategies for supporting our Black, Indigenous, and people of color connected students both on and off college campuses throughout the state. So especially if you've got some campuses in your geographic region of the state where your agency is, this will be a really great webinar. We're really excited about this one too. I see that Patrick has put his website in the chat, so I encourage you to check him out as well. And I believe Hannah will be sending out a follow-up email with some links and resources. And you can also expect to get an email with a link to the evaluation in the near future. So we would love to get your feedback so we can hear, what worked for you, what we can do better next time, all that good stuff. And then in a couple of weeks, we will be sending out your attendance certificates for your records. And in the meantime, we will be submitting our Zoom attendance records for VSP credit. So we are going to work on all those steps. Hannah, did I miss anything or anything else we want to add?
I think that is it for now. Thank you everyone so much for coming.